Welcome back everyone to another video on the Vixen Victory channel. Today we're going to be talking about Mizuki, or Mizuki. Talking about her, just looking at her talents, looking at everything of how she's actually going to be built, looking at the teams that she's going to be best built in and how to actually put her together. Now she is a standard character, or a character that is going to be on the standard banner in the future, and looking at her on how to build her, she is a swirl based character focusing a lot in elemental mastery, which is why, especially looking at her as a character, you're going to see a lot of elemental mastery things. Now she is an animal character with a lot of focus of being a lot more on field than off field, which tends to be a little bit of an interesting issue considering we have this whole swirl mechanic. So let's actually go ahead and look at talent level of priority, and then we'll talk about her as a character. Looking in terms of talents, obviously the original, just basic, normal kind of how the character is going to go through in the event or the test trial is just going to be triple eights, like normal for all characters. But for here, honestly, the biggest one you want to focus on is going to be your skill and then your burst. Your skill is the highest priority, with the burst kind of right behind it, mainly for a lot of the healing that you're going to get through this as well. Not really too much the damage. And really talking about damage in general, that's giving it a definite increase to what it's probably actually in the first place. The normal attack talent doesn't need to be leveled at all. It is pretty basic. But let's go ahead and talk about what the talents actually do. So looking at the skill, you're basically going to go in the Dream Drifter state by using your skill, floating around. And that's basically not going to allow you to stop. So when you immediately use the skill, I'm not pressing any button. She's just going straight. And if I turn a different direction, she's gone and off the cliff. So as you can see with the skill initially, you're just going to be kind of using the skill and then just holding your W key in a different direction, or going left, right, WASD, or obviously if you're on controller, using those controls as well to just move with your left Joy-Con stick. Basically, besides that though, with Mizuki in her skill state, she's going to do some extra instances of AoE ammo damage as she does it, consistently hitting different enemies at certain intervals as she's kind of gliding around. During this time, Mizuki control her direction as I just showed, and she will also be able to pick up the special snacks that she'll get in the burst, which we'll talk about in a second. She will also increase the swirl damage that she does, or that nearby party members deal, based on her own personal elemental mastery damage. So the swirl numbers that other characters, like the electro characters, the other swirlable elements, anytime the swirl is created, that swirl number is going to be increased based off of her personal elemental mastery. And as you can see here, if you level more into it as well, this increase will also go higher, meaning that obviously more elemental mastery, the more damage she's going to do. Besides that, everything else is based off of like just straight attack percent, just straight up for the actual damage. And then looking at the burst states that it will immediately do a big AoE animo damage hit, and big is once again definitely blowing it out of proportion because it is not really that necessarily great. But overall, besides that, you do have the major kind of help here is going to be the mini Baku that is going to be thrown as well. At regular intervals, the mini Baku will create one special snack that'll be basically kind of thrown nearby. After one of your own party members picks up that special snack, if their HP is higher than 70%, the snack will explode and unleash a damage hit as well. But if they are, otherwise, if you are basically lower than 70%, if you pick it up, it will then heal the active character based on Mizuki's elemental mastery. As you can see here, it's based off her EM plus a certain amount. This will be higher as you level into this skill. So you have a little bit of more instances that will kind of be happening here, and I'll kind of show you in a basic sense how at least that is going to work with just using a barber skill just for kind of similarities. You can see the animo hits coming out of her just from the character herself kind of getting thrown at the enemies, and that's basically how her skill works. You're just kind of swirling, walking around an enemy and just swirling. That's really all you're ever really doing. Now the burst, on the other hand, you're going to have those special snacks. They're going to pop up on the ground. So if we just go ahead and wait for those to pop up, there's one right there. And then if we knock into it and we are going to do a big damage hit right there, pick up another one that's a bigger damage hit, boom, bigger damage hit. But if we ever get below the 70% HP threshold, then that will actually allow her to, wow, he just straight up missed that. Basically, you're going to allow her to actually heal the active party member rather than just straight up kind of doing some extra damage, which that's probably what she's mainly used for. So now that I have been thoroughly knocked around a lot, let's go ahead and pick up these snacks instead, and then boom. So it is a very nice heal, especially if you can get it picked up, if you really want to. So once again, a very big help for HP and just really healing your active characters. And yes, it is some extra animal swirl damage, but you're not really looking for anything too crazy anyways about that. Looking at her first passive talent, it states that when Mizuki triggers Swirl while in her Dream Drifter state, Dream Drifter's duration increases by 2.5 seconds, and this effect can happen once every 0.3 seconds for a maximum of 2 times, increasing it even further, so you can see how that's going to be increasing your duration longer. With her skill, the greatest thing about her skill is honestly, the best thing you're going to get out of Mizuki is going to be just a straight up, like, I guess it would just more or less be the idea of a lot of overworld exploration, because as soon as you use the skill, you can dash as many times as you want to, and the only thing that's really going against you is going to be your stamina. The great thing about it is that compared to other characters that do their dashes over and over again while they're in their special states, characters like Chaska, characters like Mawika, even characters that don't use Night Soul like Wanderer, when they're in the air and kind of using those dashes, they are using up some sort of points. So with those Natlan characters, they're using up Night Soul points. With Wanderer, he's using up his own personal Kukiryoku points. So if you are sprinting or dashing, you are using up those points. The great thing about Mizuki is that her duration is her duration. So you can dash or just straight up glide as much as you want, and you'll be fine either way. And once again, looking at that duration really quick, it is 5 seconds. And if you are swirling though with this passive, it is going to be increased. Looking at the next passive talent, it states that while Mizuki is in the Dream Drifter state, when other party members hit opponents with Pyro, Hydro, Cryo, or Electro attacks, which should be pretty easy considering you're trying to do that anyways, considering those are the only swirlable elements, her Elemental Mastery will be increased by 100 for 4 seconds. So an okay buff, not a crazy one, more or less helping out for that swirl damage increase you're going to get in the skill as well as the healing and the burst. That's really about it though. Overall, an interesting character, and with her kit, obviously looking at certain weapons, the best weapon for her is going to be her personal weapon, which is Sunny Morning Sleep In, high elemental mastery with a low base attack, gives some more elemental mastery after triggering a swirl, more elemental mastery after using a skill, and even more elemental mastery after using a burst. So there is plenty of opportunities to get a butt ton of elemental mastery through this weapon. Besides that though, honestly, that's really kind of her major one. If you are looking for a backup and you have for some odd reason something like Starcaller's Watch or 1,000 Floating Dreams, looking at Sitlolly or Nahida's weapons, those can work as well technically if you really want to. That can work, but honestly at the end of the day I wouldn't really say that those weapons are best to pull off any other character. From what I think a lot of people have seen, her damage is not that great. Even looking at the swirl damage, what you're really focusing on is literally everybody else's damage in the team rather than hers. Looking beyond that though, and specifically 5 stars, a lot of people are probably going to be using Sacrificial Fragments as the best weapon. It allows you to use your skill. It has that chance to basically bring down that school cooldown to 0 so that you can immediately use your skill again, which could be helpful for someone like Mizuki, especially if you want to keep throwing that one over and over again and not have to worry about your other characters who maybe have long durations of, off-field application for those other elements. Then something like Sacrificial at a high refinement is definitely going to be a very, very good weapon. Elemental Mastery main stat, like I stated. You could use things like Wandering Evenstar or Map of Mare if you don't have Sacrificial Fragments, but honestly, that is probably going to be the better weapon. I know there are 3-star weapons as well, like Emerald Orb or Magic Guide. If you're, once again, just trying to slap anything on her, then that can work. But honestly, what you're really going to be using Mizuki for really isn't even combat. You're probably just trying to throw together a build together just so that you can have her for the overworld or just kind of something fun. But besides that, let's go ahead and look at artifact sets beyond the weapons. Now, artifact sets, and I'm kind of being pretty quick with this because the build is pretty, it's not really anything crazy. You're not really changing too many things. She's forced to be on field a lot of the times, unless you're really just using the burst for every now and then. Even then, though, she's really not an amazing character to go with a lot of other teams that a lot of people are using right now. But looking at her specifically for artifacts, the best set you're going to find is the 4-piece Viridescent set. You're increasing your swirl damage, which is a big thing here, as well as you're decreasing the elemental resistance shred in the 4-piece of the element that you've swirled. So any of those elements that you are swirling from off-field are going to be getting a buff of some sort here, as well as the swirl damage that's created from the 2 reactions of Anemo and the other reactions in the party. So you're getting a lot of extra stuff there, never mind the 2-piece increasing Anemo damage bonus. Once again, this isn't really going to be anything that's going to improve your Mizuki from 0 to 100. Mizuki, I think, can maximum hit 40 anyways, but I think overall, when looking at the best sets for her, Viridescent stands at the top. You could try some other ones, especially ones that are going to increase maybe like specific skill damage or whatnot, but honestly, Viridescent's just going to do you the best anyways. Looking in terms of main stats really quickly, you should really just be going triple EM across the board. That's what they're going to be doing on the trial version of her anyway, so you should really try to stick to that. Yes, you can look for energy recharge if you really want that burst back for a lot of the healing, but you can technically go for some damage stats if you really want to, just for the straight animo hits that she does. And that's also what you'll see here. Attack percent isn't a terrible stat to go after. Obviously, EM on the pieces that you can get EM is going to be very helpful. Honestly, the energy recharge can be helpful, but you're really going to want to focus probably on a little bit of attack and probably that ER just to basically balance out how much EM you really have. EM, once again, is mainly helping for the healing as well as the increase to your swirl damage. Besides that, yes, you can try to focus on crit, but it's really not that necessary. And ER is kind of just a better stat to go after, really just have that burst. That burst really is more helpful for that healing, and that's really about it. The damage itself isn't really that spectacular, and trying to build any more damage really isn't that fantastic anyways, so that's kind of the idea. Plus, swirl damage in and of itself can't be increased and critted, so it doesn't really make much sense to try to go off of that anyways as well. Now, looking at her, honestly, I would just state when looking at Constellations that we should just stay away from Constellations with her as a character. Yes, she's a fun and cool character, and honestly, yes, we'll be able to see a lot of good stuff in the events and whatnot, but honestly, just wait for her to come out whenever she comes out in the standard, and hopefully look to lose to her rather than your 17th Chi-Chi. But looking at the Constellations, just so you have a good idea of what they do, when Mizuki is in the Dream Drifter state, she will continuously apply the 23 Nights Awaiting effect to nearby opponents for 3 seconds every 3.5 seconds. When an opponent is affected by animo damage triggered by swirl reactions, while the aforementioned effect is active, the swirl will be cancelled, and the swirl instance has its damage against this opponent increased by 1100% of Mizuki's elemental mastery. Basically changing those swirl numbers into bigger numbers. That's what that huge thing basically states. Looking at the C2, it states that when Mizuki enters the Dream Drifter state, every elemental mastery point she has will increase all nearby party members' pyro, hydro, cryo, or electro damage bonuses by 0.04% until the Dream Drifter state ends. Now, you might have thought, wow, this is really good, and honestly, yes, it is. Will it be anything absolutely insane though in the future? It could possibly be, but honestly, once again, her damage that she has is really nothing crazy. A lot of the characters, and we'll talk about this in the team section, that you're going to use her with, characters like possibly like Fischl, Yaimiko, Malika, Farina, all those characters that are off-field appliers and really good at it. Honestly, at that point, you'd rather just throw them either putting some of those characters on field or putting, honestly, just the characters that fit better with them as their on-fielders on field rather than using someone like Mizuki. Now, don't get me wrong, the C2 is definitely very helpful for having those off-field characters damage increase, but once again, by putting Mizuki in this team, it's just kind of locking you down by putting her as the on-field character, which is extremely difficult because usually you want somebody very strong in that slot as your on-fielder, and Mizuki just doesn't live up to that hype. Now, looking at the C3, it increases the level of the skill by 3, and the C5 increases the level of the burst by 3. Looking at the C4, it states that picking up a snack from the burst will deal both damage and heal, and will restore 5 energy to Mizuki. Energy can be restored this way 4 times per her burst duration. Honestly, that's pretty good. It is a 20 energy help at the end of the day by picking up 4 snacks, and it is damage and healing. It helps a little bit more, and she is a standard character, so this definitely does feel like they are standard constellations. Now let's go ahead and talk about that C6. While Mizuki is in the Dream Drifter state, swirl damage dealt by nearby party members can score crit hits, with crit rate fixed at 30% and crit damage fixed at 100%. Now, these swirl numbers are not going to be anything necessarily insane, but I guess it could be kind of helpful to just crit every now and then, especially if you're just having fun with the team. It definitely will help things definitely move along faster, but once again, you've got to get 7 copies of Mizuki to even get here. And that's why you should really just be waiting for her to hit standard, is that even still, I don't think this is necessarily extremely good. Most of our other standards, I don't even know why, are actually still okay and good to use on certain specific teams, but it seems like with Mizuki, they just really went under par and almost forced her to be bad just so they could put her on the standard banner and still make her one of the worst standard banner characters we have. But maybe, I don't know, we'll look at the future and hopefully, like Dia, actually get some really good use out of her if we can get something like that in the future. Now, looking a little bit further, let's go ahead and talk about some teams. As you can see with the team already here, probably one of the better teams, and especially in my mind that I see using with Mizuki, is going to be this type of team as a taser team. Now, this team, especially if you've done the trial, and if you haven't, I would definitely heavily suggest doing it. I've done it plenty of times, and I even used her beforehand on plenty of other things. So I've tried her out with a lot of characters on my account previously, and I really did not see amazing results. But I did definitely see some fun teams that I could definitely see working that would be kind of fun to look at. The first team I'm definitely going to suggest is going to be, once again, that Taser team setup. Using Mizuki, but definitely not this team. You can use Auron, especially if you have him, and in this team, it's definitely going to be more helpful. But I would use possibly someone like Auron, but honestly, using someone like Yaimiko and Fischl together with Mizuki and someone like Farina is definitely going to do you better to help Mizuki out at the end of the day. You're seeing a lot of damage help from characters like Yaimiko and Fischl. If you don't have Yaimiko, use Auron, use both 4 stars, and then just use Farina. Farina is extremely helpful because, once again, all 3 of those characters are going to have constant off-field without any need for normal attacks or burst hits or anything like that. They are just attacking from off-field. All Mizuki's really doing is helping that swirl damage increase, and at the same time using Viridescent to possibly increase some of their damage that's just personal damage from off-field. She's not really kind of helping herself at that point. But it does mean that she does have some pretty good usability in those Taser teams. Once again, though, at that point, there are plenty of other teams that honestly just work way better by throwing other characters that are Electro or Animo characters on field as the DPS. Sadly, Mizuki doesn't do exceptionally well, really, on any team, but let's go ahead and jump to the next one. Another team that you could use is actually using something that I saw, which was Animo Traveler. Now, I know that makes absolutely no sense, but using Animo Traveler with this allows her to have a fun team where she's, once again, constantly moving in this Dream Drifter state in her skill. And while doing so, she's kind of slowly following this tornado that the Traveler produces. So if you can slap Farina or Yaimiko or anything like that, and then pair it with somebody like Mawika, honestly, a pretty fun team. That is actually an exceptionally fun team. If you want to throw in a character like Sitlali and Mawika, throwing in Animo Traveler, and Mizuki, you kind of get this like fire tornado that kind of creates and constant melts from both characters. So if you have, whatever element is picked up in the Animo Swirl in the Traveler's Burst, you have kind of this huge tornado that's either cryo or pyro, and you're having the other character deal pyro or cryo against it, melting consistently, seeing some pretty good damage. And Mizuki's able to follow it just because she has that constant faster state of just kind of following it. And so that's kind of a fun team that I saw that I definitely would suggest. It's more or less, once again, a funny team, but not necessarily anything great. Another team you could try is some sort of freeze team, throwing in someone, once again, like Farina into the team, and even throwing in other characters like Rosaria or characters like Shenhe, Charlotte, once again, characters that have a lot of cryo application just constantly happening, even once again, Sitlali, increasing hydro damage for those characters because of some of the buffs that Sitlali even gives. So you could see some pretty good fun teams with that, but once again, they have to be frozen enemies, so bosses will not really work that well. And once again, the damage is not going to be anything that's going to be stellar, but it will be kind of fun to look at and see. More or less, a lot of the teams that I could throw together and talk about are really just going to be fun teams that could work in theory and probably on the lower floors of the Abyss, definitely fun. In the Imaginarium Theater, probably once again on the lower levels, definitely going to be a lot more fun. And if you do have Mizuki leveled and it is an Animo type, kind of Imaginarium Theater going on, then using Mizuki early on and using her with maybe some of those not so happily used characters could actually bring a lot of fun and enjoyment in a run in the Imaginarium Theater. But beyond that, I really don't see too much use being used for her, in specifically the combat area. Outside of that, though, once again, I think overall, most people have already said it, and I kind of made a joke at the beginning of the video with Mizuki, and I think that definitely holds its truth overall to it. We just don't see anything that's exceptionally well with her. I've even tried to make her do some weird plunge team with a C6 Farazan, a Shanyun, and a Farina with Shanyun's weapon as well, increasing that plunge damage. And Mizuki had her personal weapon, and it just was not that fantastic either. I even threw her on a different weapon. That didn't really work out, which was Lost Prayer, so it was not that fantastic. And once again, it's just because putting her on that swirl is really her best option, and even then, she's really just not a fantastic character. The heals are exceptionally well, and she does run on a viridescent, so once again, that could still work if you can swirl correctly and throw it on. That definitely works. I did throw her in the Abyss, which was absolutely abysmal, but throwing her in there with someone like Mawika and Sitlali as kind of the on-field drivers, and then using like Bennett and Mizuki, once again, the heals are very helpful overall. If you don't have someone like Bennett, or you put Bennett on the other team, that could definitely be helpful, but beyond that, I really don't see too much use in combat for her. Outside of that, exploration is really going to be her best bet, especially when you're just trying to get over those longer bodies of water and you don't really want to swim and you're not in Fontaine, then you don't really have to worry about it as much. But still, it is not an exceptionally long skill duration, but hey, every once in a while having this just kind of go around, it is pretty far and it does go a pretty long distance, so you can get a pretty good distance overall with it, so it's not terrible, but it's really not that exceptional either. Well, that's everything I've got talking about Mizuki in this specific video. If you guys did like the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Let me know what you guys are looking forward to building her. What teams are you guys using? If you guys even pulled her, or is this just a character everybody's just waiting like me for the standard banner and kind of waiting to use their wishes on somebody actually useful for their account? If you guys liked the video, please go ahead and like and subscribe. Thank you guys again for watching the video, and I'll see you guys in the next one.